Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for another monster 5-game preview podcast is my good mate, Sixties. Whew, big fella, we're into the home stretch for the senior competitions in the men, and the ladies are just getting into gear in their competitions. It's round 23 for the fellas, and round 3 in the NRLW, as well as round 6 in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. So a lot of asynchronous football happening right now, mate. Eels coming off a pretty good weekend. Didn't quite get all the results we wanted, but got a couple of big ones. How are you feeling ahead of this big preview?
Mate, I feel strangely positive coming into this week. And let's also send out a reminder right now that we will be there in Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, in the bistro for our pre-game appearance with our Eels legend guest, Michael Butner. And that will be happening from 5:30 p.m. So it gives you a chance to come in, have a feed, have a drink, listen to some footy talk, meet an Eels player from the past that's certainly achieved a lot, not only in his career, but also in his life. So he's a wonderful guest to have, Michael Butner. So it gives you a chance to meet him, grab a photo with him, get him to sign something before you head over for the main game. Looking forward to that, John. It's always great when we've got Michael on as a guest. Looking forward to meeting people, as we always get to do, in the bistro on these pre-game appearances. And, John, so I've got a bit of a vibe about this week, and that's strange considering how we were feeling in the previous games when the Eels have actually turned up and had a red-hot crack. And I couldn't find that positivity before the game last week, and I think you and I were made to eat our words by the team.
The best kind of humble pie. The best kind.
Yeah. So it was a strange week last week to feel, really, really down. And just before we go on, a shout out to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Greg and the team, of course, been on board with the Cumberland Throw. They're great supporters of the Eels, and they've been with us almost since our inception. So really appreciate their support in helping us bring Eels content to you. But as I was saying, mate, it feels strange to have this positivity in a week where, late last week we were finding out about Blaze Talangi moving off to the Panthers next year, although we're still waiting for the outcome of the cooling off period. I'm sure the Eels would have gone back in there with a counter offer to try and get him to stay, and also to try to secure his younger brother Ryder, who's part of the Eels Jet squad, an Australian schoolboy front rower. And then all of the pylon that's happened on NRL 360, and especially the rumours. And I mean, they keep saying, no, this isn't rumour, this is fact, about Mitch Moses wanting out from the Eels. Look, just very quickly on that, I think we know that the main way to shut that down is by Mitch Moses coming out and making a definitive statement, and not one that's coerced by the club, but one that's actually a genuine statement from Mitch Moses. Look, it needs to be shut down, because what we have at the moment around the club is a lot of negative perception. And of course there's going to be negative perception because we're just not getting any genuine successes in terms of recruitment and retention. We've added Zach Lomax for next season, but aside from that, there hasn't been any positive news. That the Eels, I don't think they would attempt it to spin it any other way. It's been bad news after bad news, and of course, all this does is to fuel into a media that's looking for the sort of response that they're actually getting. And I'm not going to suggest that any talk around Mitch Moses has no merit. What I'm saying is the only way that you're going to shut it down is literally through Mitch coming out and declaring that he doesn't know where this is coming from. Look, we'd be surprised, John, if Mitch isn't unhappy.
You would be more surprised if he was perfectly happy, wouldn't it? Because look, he is ultra competitive. We saw that with State of Origin, helping carry the Blues to a big I suppose it was a big underdog series win. And even week to week with Parramatta, he's not afraid to put his teammates on blast if he feels they're underperforming on the field. So when things are falling apart, and they have been falling apart, we've spoken about it, there's no need to shy away from it. The Eels have fallen apart a bit. He's understandably going to be frustrated. I'd be more concerned if he wasn't, because that would mean that he's happy to cruise on a paycheck rather than trying to aspire to win a premiership at the club. So yeah, if he is upset, that's perfectly rational. But like you said, there's a difference between being frustrated and upset and then wanting out because you feel like everything's run its course here. So
yeah, absolutely. So he doesn't actually have to come out and say that he's happy at the Eels. He just has to come out and say, look, I'm not going anywhere. These are tough times. And no, I'm not happy about everything that's happened this year. But you know what? I'm not here on a paycheck. I'm here because I want to be here and I'm not going anywhere. And I can be unhappy, but still not going anywhere. I can be part of the reason that things get turned around. I can be one of the catalysts in turning it around. That's what I want to be. And now, I'd be hoping that would be what he'd be thinking. I would be hoping that the club wouldn't have to say to him, look, we need you to come out and say something. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he is upset to the point that he actually doesn't want to come out and say something. But we're not going to have that speculation go away by a club statement. That's basically what I'm saying. There's no point in the club coming out and saying, look, everything's fine. Because the thing is, if everything was fine, all the narratives wouldn't be taking place that they are. There's only one way of fixing this, and that's through the likes of Mitch Moses. And if we get more speculation of the same around Dylan Brown coming out. Now, Dylan's come out and he said,
we've got a contract for the next 100 years.
Yeah, that's right. But, obviously we've got the, contracts that you and I don't understand and can't rationalise in terms of options and, when they kick in and, it's, that's a whole other story and one that's been talked about enough in the media anyway. But, yeah, I mean, for the time being, he's got a contract, and you know what? There's been plenty of unhappy players that have stuck around with their contracts anyway and continue to perform on a weekly basis. And probably the greatest example of that is Ben Hunt at the Dragons.
Yeah. Because
I don't think there is a single supporter out there from any other club, let alone Dragons supporters, but from any other club, who can't say that despite Hunt being openly unhappy for at least 2 seasons, he continues to be one of the Dragons' best players week in, week out. And the Dragons just stuck strong on, look, if you want to leave, you can leave, but you won't be playing with anyone else because you have a contract at the Dragons. And it's as simple as that. The same thing exists for Eels players. And if I cannot imagine that the club would look at granting any sort of early release for players that they would desperately want to keep, players that are integral to the Eels, not sliding any further than where they are, people that are integral to the Eels turning things around. We've already said that we're really pleased with the appointment of Nathan Brown to be one of the assistant coaches at the club. we were able to learn firsthand about how Nathan was regarded by the players in the pathway system during his short tenure at the club as the Elite Pathways coaching coordinator. And of course, that followed on from his role in doing the review of the club's pathways. And of course, Nathan last year got involved as well with helping out with the NRLW team. So he had a multifaceted role. But the main thing that we know Nathan for was that work with Elite Pathways. Mm-hmm. He's highly respected. The young players spoke, glowingly about him, and that wasn't us asking players, what do you think of Nathan Brown? That was just players volunteering.
It wasn't a T-ball question, wasn't it? It was unprompted, praise coming from multiple parties. So it's a good get for the club.
And we've already had feedback from families of younger players who are really pleased about him being appointed to the club. So it is a really good move, and we really have to keep Parramatta aspirational players, and we're losing them. We've been losing them. We need to look at ways that we can stop that. And I think having someone on the senior staff who has a knowledge of the players that are coming through, first and foremost, and then secondly is also respected by the players that are coming through, it's got to be a good thing. So anyway, mate, we should probably leave that there because no doubt there's going to be more and more breaking news about what's happening in the Parramatta space that we'll be able to talk about on the news podcast. But we're really going to try to power through this preview as best we can. You're going to set the clock now, and you and I are going to attempt to get through this in around about 35 to 40 minutes. That's our goal, mate. We're really going to
very optimistic. But yeah, final comment. I mean, the Parramatta news cycle is a bit like the old mythical snake that eats its own tail, isn't it? It's sometimes hard to separate where certain parts begin and end. So we will cover it as it develops, and let's get into those previews, mate. We start, as always, except when there's a bye, and there's not a bye this week, with the Jersey Flegg. Eels looking to make a serious tilt for the finals. They've loaded up, restocked, brought all the big boys back for this one as they take on the third-place Panthers at New Era Stadium. Game takes place 3:00 p.m. Saturday at the aforementioned venue. Hopefully it's going to be good weather for what should be a great game. Eels look like this with a number of changes, calling back troops from New South Wales Cup. Arpa Twiddle goes back to fullback this week after a good stint in the halves. Moe Alamadine and Oliver McCarthy on the flanks. Devontae Vivella and Araz Nanva in the centres. Matty Hunter partners Joshua Lynn in the halves, the 6 and 7 respectively. Sam Tuivasa and Tinkin Brown, the two big bookends, with Riley Smith at dummy half. Jock Brazel is back in Cup, and he's back from Cup, and he's on the edge with Don Stratus on the opposite side of the field. Saxon Pryke, likewise back from the senior grade at lock forward, which means the bench is Max Tupou, Tyrese Lakini, Damascus Nemia, and Raf Destratus. So some pretty big names out of that team, guys that have been playing really well, guys that are very unlucky not to be part of this 17. And I suppose the silver lining for several of those players is that they're not actually being demoted per se. They're getting a pretty good opportunity in another grade, which we'll talk about shortly. But this is a good-looking team. They're taking on a team that is traditionally a powerhouse in this grade in the Penrith Panthers. The Panthers are in third, Eels in ninth, but the latter position for the Eels means that they're actually close to 6. They're one win behind 6 now, for and against. Not too bad relative to their peers in that area. Plus 25 for the Eels. It's plus 77 for the 6th place Dragons, but there's a minus 20 and an 85 in terms of points differential between the Eels in 9th place and the Dragons in 6th place. So if they can get some good wins on the road to the final round, that'll take care of itself, no doubt. But big one here, taking on the Penrith Panthers. These games are always pretty fiery. We've seen in the preseason that they can get very fiery. And we've got some names that you might recognise there. Jet Cleary, the youngest Cleary sibling there. There's the Hateri Papali'is, Patua and Angelis, who have been good for the Penrith pathways there. I'm trying to see anyone else I recognise coming straight off the thing there. There is a Nullivar too. I didn't realise there was a young Nullivar in the Penrith pathways, but that would make sense. But and Billy Scott, who we saw, I think, play for New South Wales 19s last year. So, quickly, in as so many words as you want, 60s, how did the Eels win this one? And if they do, by how much?
It's arguable that every game from here on in is season defining for the Eels, but this is one of the biggest games that they're going to face because of the fact that it's one of the biggest challenges that they're going to face. I did see Jet Cleary get injured earlier this year when I was at St Mary's to watch one of the early season Jersey Flegg games for the Eels, and he might have been, was he playing SG ball at that stage, Jet Cleary? I'm just trying to think whether it was an SG ball or Jersey Flegg game that I saw him playing. But anyway, he was literally taken off the field, and Ivan Cleary was near us with the family in the grandstand, and they're obviously very disappointed that he got injured, very concerned that he got injured. But how long he's been back, I don't know. I haven't really been keeping track of the personnel that Penrith have been putting out on a weekly basis. But, John, the thing is that the Eels have found some consistency. They had a couple of rough moments against the Warriors last week. It got closer than it should have. But when a team's got a bit of form, you know, they win those ugly games, don't they?
Yep.
And I would have described last week as an ugly game because of the fact that, you know, the Warriors haven't had such a strong year, but they were having to travel to New Zealand to play that game. The Warriors got a couple of tries off kicks. They had a couple of long-range tries. They had a very, very fast winger that caused some problems for the Eels. But, you know, the Eels just kept turning up, and it was evidenced by the fact that they saved that last second try, that the work of Hunter at fullback, just managing to get the Warriors winger's foot into touch.
Barely into touch, as you're saying in this podcast. But like you said, when you're in good form, those are scrappy wins. You find a way to get to the finishing line. And then when the season is in the books, you look back and you don't care that it was close in the, I was about to say 79th, but it's the 69th minute for Jersey Flegg. All you care is that there were 2 points on the competition table given to you. So Eels taking care of business, and this is a big one, isn't it? Because you can't really, I mean, maybe you do have an ugly win here, but statistically speaking, you're going to have to play good football to take on the Penrith Panthers this week.
Yeah, and look, one of the key players for the Eels this season has been Riley Smith. He's coming up against his old club.
Big revenge game,
he'll have a point to prove there. Riley may well be in calculations to move further up the Eels pecking order with the departure of Bud's Arthur next year, and Riley being, Riley having a little bit of experience being called up to New South Wales Cup on a couple of occasions this year for Parramatta. So I would like to think that the Eels do rate him as having the potential to develop even further as a player. He's got all the right attributes in terms of effort areas, determination, seems to be able to read the game reasonably well. He certainly looks like he's a player that's popular with his peers. He's almost that the Gutho of the team. You know, he's the one that rallies the players and keeps the effort areas going. I was told right at the start of the season that he absolutely blitzed the preseason. He was about the fittest player in the club. And his efforts haven't really shown anything other than that, you know, that he is a supremely fit young bloke. But as you said, they're also bolstered by the forwards of the likes of Jock Brazel and Saxon Pryke dropping back in there. So, look, the Eels have been functioning well as a unit. They believe in each other. The team spirit is great. You know, there is that self-belief in what they're doing. They're playing a good brand of football. And probably one of the best attributes has been the improvement in their defence during the season. I'll tip them to get the upset in this. I have to, mate. I have to, because they've given me reason to believe that they can shake things up. the other thing is too, they at this stage of the season, they just can't afford to drop any points because they're behind with four games to go, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's literally the game that they really have to lock away to be able to feel that they're not in a near impossible situation after this. So
it's a big game on multiple fronts, Sixties, because obviously in terms of their finals aspirations, it's mostly a case of win out, and you'll get there. But on top of that, with 3 games to follow here, and this game being at New Era, unbelievably, this is a crazy schedule. The Eels have a month of home games coming up now. New Era,
yes.
Eric Tweedow, New Era, Eric Tweedow. And they're taking on third place Panthers, 4th place Knights, 14th place Fiji, and 6th place Dragons. So the Fiji game, I wouldn't say it's a gimme still, but it's probably like one that they should win. But then there's 3 tough games there. 3 really tough games there against top 8, like people they're going to meet in the finals, like provisionally if they were going to go in right now. So
yeah,
starts on Saturday with a big game against Panthers. Like you, I'm going to tip them to win. They've taken care of business. I mean, we've spoken about it. If you get rid of that diabolical start where there was a bit of self-sabotage going on with some games that they threw away at the start of the season, though, I think you said they're on 7. They've been 10-3 since then. Like, that is a phenomenal win rate. So I'm backing them to get the job done. It's probably going to be a tough one, probably going to be a tight contest in terms of the scoreboard. So Eels by single digits.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
All right, 1 down. Let's go. Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. Eels versus Dogs is a bit of a old school rivalry game, obviously. Sunday, 1:00 p.m., Eric Tweedow Stadium. Okay, Eels look like this. Yasmin Baker at fullback, Debbie Dwahi, Shay Shipton on the flanks, Kate Fallon, Aaliyah Halmono in the centres, Talara Bambut, Sarah Demick in the halves. And you got Aliti Namose, Chelsea Makira, Raishi Farmasili from 8 to 10. And then from 11 to 13, Bella Sandvid, captain Talisha Maiva, and River Lee Arlo. On the interchange, Raf Perigo was back after a couple of games on the sidelines due to suspension. She's joined on the interchange by Lasalgo Sita Payne, Ashley Pottinger, and Fontaine Tafua. A young rotation there. Extended roster, Liana Dimmick, Tahila Valuanga, Caitlin Stanley, Alicia Bell, and Rory Muir. Taking on a Dogs team, if I just quickly check this table here, I think we discussed it on the Teamless Tuesday /NRL News podcast, that the Dogs are mid-table like the Eels. 3 wins, 2 losses. The Parramatta's 2 wins, 3 losses. So a little bit of a palindrome there, or reverse splits. But definitely a game the Eels can look to be competitive in. And this one is not broadcast on any streaming platforms, unfortunately, so you have to get out Eric Twitter if you want to catch it. But yeah, it's going to be, I mean, the Dogs have been so good in the pathway 60s, it hasn't quite translated to Harvey Norman Women's Premiership dominance, where if there'd been anything like their Lisa Fiala, Tasha Gale groups, it would have been damn near undefeated at the top of the table. Instead, that's Parramatta's sister feeder club there in the Wenty Magpies, who are the only undefeated team left in the competition. But Canterbury are going to be pretty resolute in this one, you got to think.
Yeah. And look, unfortunately, there is a clash between this game and the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership game. The NRLW game. It's.
That's classic scheduling, isn't it? Like,
but to be honest, I'd be out at Eric Tweedale providing a live blog if there wasn't the clash.
Yeah, 1 o'clock kickoff here, 12 o'clock kickoff in the NRLW. It's just
that's it.
It's brutal. Yeah,
all they had to do was, if it had been possible to have the kickoff at 2 p.m. Well, you can do both. You can watch the NRLW on broadcast and then get out in person to Eric Tweedale Stadium. It is a real shame with that. But look, getting into that's a whole other issue. But look, getting into the nitty gritty of things, it was. I didn't catch the last week's game, but I've gone over the stats. And look, stats don't always tell the whole story of matches, because it doesn't tell the whole story of moments in games that are either won or lost, turning points that are potentially there. But I'll tell you what I saw in the stats that's consistent for this team. and that's completions. And I've spoken about this before. The Eels have got some real threats in their team in terms of the questions that they ask of opposition teams. And let me just run through what I mean as an example of that. So they had a 12-point loss to the Sharks, but this was a team that generated 6 line breaks to the Sharks 5, had 47 tackle breaks to the Sharks 41. The set distance was pretty much equal with that, and the Eels had a better effective tackle rate of 81.82% to the Sharks 79%, and had far less ineffective tackles to the Sharks. It was Sharks 12 ineffective tackles, the Eels 7. But they made pretty much the same number of errors, but the Eels also conceded 5 penalties to the Sharks 3. And then when we talk about completion rates, the Eels haven't been able to get past the 70% mark. In fact, the 70% completion rate was actually a standout performance in compared to the completion rates in the other matches. It was a 62% completion rate against the Sharks last week. Now, it's not that the Sharks were that much better. The Sharks actually had the same completion rate. But the Eels have to change that. They have to eliminate these errors, because all the good work that they do, all the questions that they ask in attack, all the good work that they would do in defence, they are constantly putting their own defence under pressure and handing opportunities to the opponents if they keep making those errors, if they don't complete their sets. So that, to me, the game almost starts and ends with that, as far as I'm concerned, because I've got faith in the talent that's out there, that's in the team. I've got faith in the coaches of that team, but they just have these moments where it's like an error will become contagious.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why I think my prediction is going to be on 2 splits. If they complete at 75% or better, I think they can get the Bulldogs. Underneath that benchmark, I think they'll probably lose by 1 to 2 tries. So
yeah,
it's going to, like you said, the one error becomes contagious. And so they've got to get a grip on that. And they've got to rein in the errors and the opportunities that you're affording your opposition, because they've been in every game this year, except the ones that they've lost by, double digits, where they're still been, scoring good points. You look at those possession splits, like you said, 60s, and they're just giving away the ball. And you can't do that. So if they complete at that benchmark, I think they win. Otherwise, I think it's going to be not a big loss, but 1 to 2 tries.
Oh, look, I think I'll just go with what you've said there, because if I'm talking about completions, and then you say, look, if they complete above 75%, they probably get the win. Below that, they probably don't. If they complete around the rate that they have been, I can't see any team being able to win games with such a low completion rate. And you know what? Credit to them that they've actually won games with
and being highly competitive in others. Yeah, I know. It speaks to the talent in the squad, but yeah, the polish needs to happen.
Oh, and the reason is, if you watch the entire games that these girls play, when they're completing sets, you will see them complete classic rugby league sets. Everything is, it's almost like clockwork when they're completing. But then when you're seeing a set where there's an error, it builds to that error, because like I said, things become contagious. Bad passes become contagious, and eventually the ball gets put down. It's almost like, one bad pass will trigger 3 or 4 bad passes, sometimes even in the same play.
Yep.
It's almost like it must be frustrating for the coaches to see that. But I think once they all understand how important these, and we've spoken about it as well. Like, sometimes you just got to tuck the ball under the
Yep.
arm.
Yep.
And, if you've received a bad pass, you don't need to get rid of the ball. Like, just tuck it under the arm, take the tackle. If you're in a position where you're going to be far better off to retain possession rather than put the next person under pressure, just keep it. One of the things we loved about Dylan when he first came into the NRL team as an inexperienced player was the fact that he would take the tackle rather than throw a bad pass. And, that's probably what we want to see here. So anyway, mate, that brings us now to the New South Wales Cup match.
Yeah, so curtain raiser on Friday night to the NRL, which means, of course, it's taking place at CommBank Stadium, 5:30 p.m. kickoff. And just a reminder, as like you said in the early part of the podcast, we will be live at the bistro at kickoff for this game. So it's us or the game, and I don't blame you if I watch the game. But Eels taking on the Panthers, 10v6 in terms of ladder seating. Eels with a few changes this week. We talked about the young boys getting called back to Flegg. Also, young boys coming up in their place. So some cool opportunities here for some young guys. At fullback, it's Zach Sini. On the wings, Lorenzo Mulatalo and Isaac Lumi. Nice little return here from Ethan Martin. Got a few games to try and impress Jason Rolls ahead of next year. He plays in the centres with Morgan Harper on the other side. Manny Luke is the one that's been thrown to the Wolves this week. Poor Manny, being really solid at dummy half. He now has to hold the gap at 5'8", which I can't imagine is a specialty position for him. He'll partner Ethan Sanders in the halves. Front row still looking pretty strong. Ogden and Makatoa, the bookends. Matty Arthur, the dummy half. In the back row, we see our first young man getting a chance here from the Flegg in Will Lewis. He'll play on the edge. Tony Mattielli getting called into the starting team as he works back from that long-term hammy injury he missed most of the season with. Brock Parker, one of the fixtures for the Eels this year, at lock in the scrum. On the interchange, plenty of young kids here with Antioch Vitala Mariner making his cup debut. A centre by trade this year, 60. It's going to be interesting to see how he's used in this game. Is it in the back row? Is it just the emergency back? We have to wait and see. And then you got Josiah Funa Ayuta, which is one of the real big surprises. First year SG Ball eligible player, real blue chip prospect, fantastic player on the right edge. Dominated Harold Matts, did very well in SG Ball, and then really found his feet in Jersey Flegg in the same year. So he's come a long way from first year SG Ball player to first year Flegg player to first year New South Wales Cup player in the same season. So going to be keen to see how he goes. And then rounding out the bench, Kyle Castle and Reece Alderton taking on a Penrith Panthers team who we got here. Isaiah Long is obviously a very talented young fullback. Kapola's got NRL games from the Tigers. Tyrone PG, very experienced. Jack Cole and Brad Schneider we've seen in the NRL this year, working in relief of at the time injured Nathan Cleary. Austin Diaz, former Eel there. Is Jordan Grant a former Eel? I'm not sure about that one, but I do know that Sione Fanua, I believe, is a former Eel on the interchange. One time, if it is the same Sione, one-time fullback prospect for the Eels in the juniors. So interesting team there from Penrith. Always going to be tough to beat in this one. Our boys, they haven't thrown in the towel, don't get me wrong, but they've had a couple of really rough outings. The Warriors put the Queen's through them last week, and they need to leave that in New Zealand and come back and play some good football if they're going to be competitive against their Western Sydney rivals.
I think last week we really didn't dedicate too much time to the New South Wales Cup preview because I think I simply said this is a game that's going to be played out in the head. They're either in the game or they're not in the game mentally. And, it's obvious that there were some issues because they conceded again over 40 points against the Warriors virtually within the same month of football. So
there was a little part of me that was hoping we were going to see a palindrome 2-game split there where Eels were great in the first half of the first encounter, terrible in the second half of the first encounter, terrible in the first half of the second encounter, and with the Warriors to collapse and the Eels be great in the second half of the second encounter, and it didn't happen. The Eels they didn't have the juice left in the tank. So it's going to be tough to back up that loss into this 160s. Warriors obviously a good team in the Cup, but Penrith, again, they've been the benchmark. Not at the top of the table right now, but they're always highly competitive, especially this time of the year.
Yep. So for me, the main interest in this, some of the players that you mentioned as interesting watches. So Ethan Martin returning from that hamstring injury. I don't think he's played any football since that injury. I think this is his first game back. I had wondered whether he was going to come back through Ron Massey Cup, because he played some Ron Massey Cup for Wenty earlier in the season before he started to make his mark in New South Wales Cup. From what I looked at, I think this is his first game back. I probably don't want to talk too much about poor old Manny having to play at 5'8". That's just a measure of what our stocks are like at the moment in terms of player availability. He's done a good job being the dummy half of the interchange this year. Will Lewis, we got to know Will a little bit through the feature story that we did on the Para House.
Mm-hmm.
So he was one of the young players that was in the Parramatta House, having come down from Queensland and playing in the SG ball team last year. He graduated up to Jersey Flegg. He's probably been in and out of the Jersey Flegg side. I think he's had some injury issues this year. But yeah, good to see him getting some senior open age football with this. And then, of course, you mentioned Faitala Mariner, who I think has done a very good job in the centres in Jersey Flegg in those games.
It went from being a really problem area for the Eels to fill on a weekly basis during that 0-6, 0-7 run to, I believe it was him and Araz Namva and Devonta Vela too, some combination of the three that came into the team and pretty much put under lock and key at that point. So yeah, he's been really solid in the Flegg. And again, not sure if there is a connection to Raymond Faitala Mariner, because I think we asked and the tentative answer was no, but it's such a unique surname, isn't it, in rugby league? So
it is, and but I think he's from Queensland, is he not?
Mm.
I've got a feeling that he might be another one of the Queensland recruits, but I'd have to double check that, because there are quite a few that we found that we've added to pathways or to Jersey Flegg that have had their origins in Queensland. And of course, you mentioned Josiah Funa Iuta, who was a real blue chip prospect, pathways player, Australian schoolboys. As you mentioned,
Captain Harold Matts, playing super young eligibility in both ball and flag, and obviously now cup. So, yeah, very, very talented young man.
Yeah, and so my feedback is intelligent young man, leadership potential. He's a big unit as well.
Like I said, to the point where you wonder if his future lies in the middle or the edges, but if he can maintain size and explosiveness, geez, that's a weapon on the flanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I just don't know, John. I mean, will they be buoyed mentally by the injection of these younger players, or is this a case of, look, here's a group of players who are waiting for the end of the season? Their recent performance, their performances went from really having a great, genuine crack and looking like they could pull something out of the season to being highly, highly disappointing in what
look,
they...
On the totality of it, I still think they did amazing to turn the season around to the point they did.
Yeah.
But they definitely ran out of gas.
That's what I'm saying. Is it just that, the season is now too long for them? They're ready for the end of the year. There might be some players in the group that are moving on. There might be, but are there some there who are looking for, making an impression to be involved in the calculations for top 30 next year? Because we know there are 7 places that have to be filled in that top 30 for next season. If the Eels aren't going to go out there and hit the player market, then they're looking at within, and this is the opportunity for blokes to sell their worth to the club. So, mate, I cannot tip the Eels.
No, it's a tough ask.
And because of what's been happening in recent weeks, I don't even want to tip. What I think the margin will be, because as a Parramatta supporter, I can't do it. I just can't do it.
I'm hoping they can scrap it out, make Penrith work really hard for a prospective victory, and then the young guys not dominate because that's such an unfair burden to put upon them, but just have good showings. Kind of like what we saw last year when we had, at the time, I think, Arthur, Geimer, Lynn, and a couple other boys come up at this corresponding point of the season and get a little bit of taste of NRL, New South Wales Cup. So that's all I'm looking for from this one.
Yeah. I really hope that, the fact they're playing at home as well, maybe that will help to turn things around because the Lidcombe game was a home game. And, look, I would have been surprised if, it shouldn't have happened anyway, but if they were leading by that sort of margin at halftime, would they have collapsed like they did at a game at Combank Stadium? I'd like to think it wouldn't, playing in front of more people than what they were at a cold and bleak Lidcombe Oval, where I just hate that ground. I hate it. It's not it's a relatively easy ground to get to and to park when it's lower grade or junior rep football, but man, it's a horrible ground to watch football at, and it's full of bad memories.
Don't get me started on suburban grounds again, Sixties. Come on. All right, so we put that one away. Move on to the big leagues. It's time for the NRLW. Eels trying to back up from a very entertaining game and a tough 2-point loss to Cronulla. They travel up to Queensland for the second time in 3 weeks, back to Brisbane, Totally Workwear Stadium, which is not a place with a lot of good memories for the Eels because I think that's the field where poor Elsie Albert did her knee when they had the Broncos on the ropes last year before getting run down by pure lack of resources. But they do take on the Cowboys, Eels in 6, Cowboys in 7. So look at this one here. Eels, no changes, I believe, from the team that just went down to Cronulla, and that's not a surprise, which means Abby Church at fullback, Faye and Donovan on the wings, our 2 Union converts in the centres, Rory Owen and Rosie Kelly. I just realised something I can make a joke about later. Cassie Towie Hiku, Rachel Pearson in the halves, Elsie Albert, Maddie Jones in the front row, Tenica Todd Hunter getting her second start at the dummy half, Chloe Jackson, the rookie, on the right edge, with Captain Mahalia Murphy on the left, Kennedy Cherrington, as always, locking the scrum, Rosie Beckett, Tyler Amiatu, Jade Fanua, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis rounding out the rotation, Tafua Asua, Brianna Eels, Chelsea McKira, Kate Fallon, and Pahuka Berryman Duff making up the extended bench. Now, I imagine that Asua and Eels will probably travel to Queensland based on the team list that we saw, because Asua was not named in Harvey Norman Women's Premiership. If I just check the Wenty lineup, I'm pretty certain that Brianna was not in their team as well. Give me 2 ticks here. Where are we? Yes, it looks like no Brianna name for Wenty. So I imagine they'll go up to Brisbane as the 2 shadow players, just in case something goes wrong in the warm-up or the lead-up to the game. And yeah, they're taking on the Cowboys 60s. We mentioned it on the news podcast, but more than a couple of players that you probably know here. You got Goldthorpe, Whitfield, the Raftran Smiths, Kira Dibb, probably heard of her. She's a pretty handy player. Manzelman, who else is there? Bree Chester. So they've got a good team. They've got some players. And then like the Eels, I think they come into this game 1 win and 1 loss. Yes, 1 win, 1 loss. So teams at parity on the ladder. But Eels, they've got, I want to say they've still got momentum. That was a good game against Cronulla. Both teams resolute in the goal line. The difference was the deflection of a ball. Whereas the Eels kicks into the in goals just, either force line dropouts or just couldn't get grounded. The Sharks got that goal line, defensive line deflection, and that was the difference. So they got no reason to be upset about that result in terms of thinking that it's going to hurt their momentum. And they got a chance to go up to Brisbane and get back into the winner's circle this week.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you were talking about it in your Gin and Logic column about the Eels being self-reflective about why the result got away from them. Certainly, luck fell the Sharks' way. A couple of 50-50 calls that I think were actually more like 70-30 calls in the Eels' favour, like 70% Eels, 30% Sharks, was flipped on its head in the adjudicating.
There were some cold drops, and then there were some assisted drops that probably should have been penalised. So that stuff does hurt you. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be changing too much for the Eels. I know that Cronulla sort of repelled them on the goal line, but I think that was more of a function of how committed the Sharks were defensively, because the Eels threw some good looks at them and just couldn't get it done in terms of scoring a fourth try. It wasn't like they couldn't score points. So I think that they stick to the plan here.
Yeah, absolutely. There wasn't really too much to address other than, look, if we're in that situation where we're hanging on, let's just complete the sets, get to the kick, play the football down the other end of the field, make the opposition come up with something extraordinary to grab the win. And I mean, they did still come up with something extraordinary in terms of that deflection, but it's almost like that moment was out of the Eels' control. But what was in the Eels' control was getting to their kicks before that. So control what they can, and then they look after things. Really like what Steve Georgalis has done with his team. You can see the structure. You can see the attacking shapes that are there with the Eels. You can see the aggression in the forwards, the commitment in defence. The girls have an obvious belief in themselves this year, and the addition of the two centres has been quite remarkable. Rory Owen just looks like an absolute natural footballer, and whilst she, as you pointed out, Rosie Kelly hasn't had a couple of the big moments that Rory Owen has, what we've seen from her is her ability to position a winger for the try.
Yeah, really good at the distribution part of being a centre. Yeah,
and I think looking at that as well, that her skills base from being a 5'8" in rugby union also comes to the fore with that ability to just get that draw and pass perfect. And so really good additions there. And of course, that shout out to Chloe Jackson, because she looks like she belongs in the top grade. We knew that she had a motor on her from what we've seen of her in playing in the age origin. We saw a little bit of her in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership to start the season. Tremendous work rate, and she brought that into the game. Wasn't overawed by an NRLW debut. So, anyone that was concerned, as they would be, about the loss of Boss Kapua, who is a talent in her own right, she would have alleviated those concerns last week. So, John, look, I'll just get straight down to it. I think the girls can win this, and I think they can win it by a margin of 10 points or more.
I was going to go for 10 points. That felt about right for me. Abby Church, first try scorer. Best on field. Geez, it's tough. There's some good players to pick from here. Maybe it is Rosie Kelly's day. Chance to the ball going down the right edge a little bit more. Chance for her to maybe flex her ability to set up her winger and maybe score one herself. So looking forward to this one. You can catch it 12 o'clock p.m. obviously Sunday by way of 9 KO and Foxtel. So make sure you catch it, because it does clash, like we said, with the other game for the women's. But NRLW is shaping up like it's going to be so good to watch this year for us. So,
I just got to come in with my tips there, John, with the best on field first try scorer. So take me to church for the first try scorer, and for best on field, I can feel Kennedy Cherrington warming up into this season, like that. Her performance.
I think she was 42 tackles last week, which I believe is top 3 in terms of NRLW single game efforts. So she's an absolute energizer bunny out there, and that's on top of scoring a really good try too, by the way. So
she's my tip to be the best on field.
Good shout. Let's go to the home stretch now, mate. Last game of that 5-game stretch across the weekend. 8 o'clock p.m. Friday, Combank Stadium. Eels hosting Penrith. 16v2, so second last versus second on the ladder. A little bit of the worst kind of sort of inverse symmetry there. Eels taking on a Penrith team that, for once, opposition doesn't welcome back any star players 60s. Don't have to worry about Nathan Cleary coming back. He already did that a couple of weeks ago. He was a problem for the Titans and the Dragons and Newcastle. Not Parramatta. He's not going to have a big game. But
I'm just double checking that reserves list, mate.
No,
he's not there.
No Dylan Edwards. He didn't make a shock recovery from, was it a PCL or posterior cruciate that he did in Origin? There's no James Fisher-Harris. He didn't miraculously overcome a groin injury. So they're per their pretty much normal program the last couple of weeks, which just means that it's the back-to-back premiers. Who cares? But yeah, quickly going over Penrith, Laurie at fullback, Taruva, To'o on the wings, Tungo and McLean of the Casey variety, because they also have a Jesse, I believe, in the centres. Then you got Jerome Luai and then captain Nathan Cleary in the halves, Leota and Lindsay Smith in the front row of Mitch Kenny, dummy half. Sorensen, Martin and Yo round out a very good back row. On the interchange, Trent Tolau, Eisenhue, Liam Henry, Maverick Geyer. Extend the roster, pretty much players that we saw in their cup team. Patea, Cole, Longy, Kapoa and Somerton. And then for the Eels, no changes this week, or at least it was going to be no changes until we found out. I didn't get the Team List Tuesday article out on Tuesday 60s. I waited Wednesday because I had a few things I had to do, and I was like, maybe they'll put an injury report out. I hit publish, and within 20 minutes, the injury report comes out, making clear what happened to Luca Moretti, who had a quadriceps injury, unfortunately. He's been put on a 4-week sideline stint provisionally, so he's probably out for the season, which means there is one change in the Eels lineup. So normally it would be like this: Gutfeld captain and fullback, Tungo and Russell on the wings, Penasini, Talangi in the centres, Brown, Arcee in the halves. Then you've got Campbell, Gillard and Greg front row alongside Brendan Hands at dummy half, Lane, Cartwright, Madison from 11 to 13, interchange, Lussick, Ofengahi, Matt Dury coming into the place on the rotation for Luca, Dan Keir rounding out the top 17, Keir getting his third NRL cap there. Extend the roster, Sanders, Kelma Tuolangi, Lumi, Morgan Harper, Makatoa. So Tuolangi not named in reserve grade, but named as a potential NRL inclusion, I suppose. We'll talk about that shortly. And then Peter Goff has the whistle, Liam Kennedy's in the box.
Okay, so look, I think they'll be 1 to 17. I'm fairly confident they'll be 1 to 17. Just on Luca Moretti, my mail is he's pretty keen to make sure he's back before the end of the season. So I don't know, maybe he doesn't do that full month out. We know Luca Moretti, he's just he loves playing football, and he plays the game like someone who loves playing football. So I reckon if there's any way he can get back before the end of the season, he'll be doing that. In terms of the Eels lineup, look, no surprises, it really, given that we had Luca out with injury, that it was Matt Dury coming in. It's basically, a forward out, a forward in. So, mate, look, I think it just comes down to, look, I said right at the start of this podcast that I am feeling surprisingly buoyant about the Eels' chances in this game. Now, I am not going to be outrageous and say, yeah, we get this. What I'm going to say is I believe that the Eels can make a genuine contest of this, and I'm not ruling out the chances of getting the victory. If you had said to me 2 weeks ago, what's going to happen with the Eels against the Panthers, and I would have said 60 points.
Yeah.
60 points difference. But
some funny parallels here, though, isn't it? Because as soon as this game came up on the schedule, it was like, oh, yeah, last year, round 26, Eels 32, Penrith 18. No Mitchell Moses, no Junior Barlaw, no Dylan Edwards for Penrith. So yes. Fisher-Harris was in it there, so the parallels aren't perfect. But, Eels, they did have a few other players available this week. In that game that would have been pretty handy for this week's game. Sevo, Simonson, who else is there? Junior was playing on the interchange. Who else is there? Oh, Jermaine Hopkins would have been pretty good too, to be honest. But but and look,
that was one of Sevo's best games.
Yeah, he had a cracking game in that one. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So look, there are some strange parallels that are there. For me, the most obvious difference between previous encounters with the Panthers, where we've either had their measure or really made them work hard for the win. But, of course, conversely, what we've seen over the last few weeks is Barrett has been able to get the Eels to expend maximum effort. And even if the execution hasn't been good, there is nothing that the Eels fans can question in terms of the players' commitment out there on the field. That's all we can ask for in terms of, if they're pulling on a jersey and they're giving us their absolute best, we can't go pointing the fingers at players. Players might make mistakes, and we might get frustrated with some players making mistakes. Their form might be a bit down. But if they're actually going out there and busting a gut and looking like they care about the game, well, John, I don't know about you, but even in a rough season like this, I can see that there isn't anything more that they could possibly do. And I think what we will see this week at a home game is more of that. I think we're going to see them again bust a gut. I think there are players right now, like at this moment, that I think have got a point to prove to the club. I think there is a real bunkering down in terms of the playing group. I think rather than players not caring, I think what you've got is a care for each other as a group. And I think that's been reflected in their performances. So how are they going to do it? You know what? I don't think it needs any sort of technical breakdown about how they're going to attack the Panthers. They'll have their game plan about how they're going to do it. And but I think everything comes down to how much commitment they have to do to every moment in the game. And we saw that there were moments in the game that they won last week. And we can point to a couple of things like a couple of efforts in particular from Brendan Hands. There was one where he cleaned up a loose pass in the 20-metre area where in recent weeks we might have turned it over in those circumstances. In recent weeks, we've turned over a loose pass like that and their opponents have been off for the prize at the other end of the field. Where there was also the tackle that he made where he wasn't content with just getting the player down to the ground. He's so in the moment that he managed to get that little lift on the players. And we got to remember that Brendan Hands is not the biggest player out there, but he managed to get his body underneath the bloke that he's tackling and leverage him into the end goal for what was turned out to be a crucial line dropout. Now, winning moments like that is what the Eels really have to focus on. And if that mental attitude is right this week, if they bring what they brought the last few weeks and get those sorts of moments in the game, they'll be in this for a long way. Because conversely, the efforts from Penrith, well, they reinforce that they're aiming for a fourth straight premiership, but they're not expending what seems like a huge amount of energy to do that. It's like coasting's the wrong word, but they're almost like they're getting the job done without having to go deep into their arsenal to get the job done, if that makes sense to you. So if they come out and they play, if the Panthers play like they have in some recent weeks, I think we're in this game. The question is, how much do they want to deliver pain to the Eels? And we know that would probably be in their wheelhouse to want to do that. I guess what I'm basically saying is, to me, the result comes down to the desire from both teams, that desire and commitment from both teams. I think the Eels will put themselves in the contest. And I think there will be some reasonably clever tactical play about where Parramatta sends the ball against the Panthers. So, but I'm not going to go too much into that. I think they will come up with some of the right calls about how they can maybe dismantle Penrith's defence. John, what's your takes?
Yeah, look, we beat them last year in that huge upset on the back of working really hard, changing the point of attack with some good offloads.
Yes.
And like you said with the Brendan Hand stuff, just pure hustle. We wanted that win so bad last year. And that's what it takes to beat Penrith. Even when you've got a full-strength roster, you got to come in there and you got to be ready to, really bust your backside. So I think the Eels will be highly competitive for a good stretch of this game. The question mark I've got is like the last 20 minutes. Do they have enough juice in the bank to carry them to the finish line? Can they engineer enough surprise plays, enough hustle plays to keep Penrith on the back foot, on the heels, and just that off balance enough that they can't get into that ominous gear they get into so often. I think they're going to be able to do it for a good portion of this game. The question, like I said, my question mark is that last part of it, because that's where Penrith are so good. They play, the 60, 70, and 80 minutes parts of the game, as well as they do the first 20. And I'd like to believe our boys can keep it close and maybe engineer an upset. I think they're still pretty strong outsiders on the full upset, but I think they're going to go out there and really, really throw some stuff at Penrith. So I'm not expecting a win. I am expecting a very competitive effort, though.
Okay, well, this week, given that we were so, I guess, critical.
Judy bound to win.
we were very much on that pessimistic side last week, that I'm entitled, and because I've been probably a little bit pessimistic the last few weeks, I'm entitled to tip maybe a little bit with the heart this week. Not just all heart. I think there's a little bit of thinking with the grey matter on this, but I think the Eels might just be able to spring an upset. I'm going to tip that we get it done by about 6 points in this game. I'm going to tip first try scorer to be one of the two brothers who line up against each other here. So I'm going to go for Tungor again. He's been a try scorer the last couple of weeks, and I think he'll get the first try this week. And my tip for best on field, gee, look, I could go a couple of obvious ways here. Maybe I still might go one of the obvious ways. But no. Look, I'll steer away from it. I'll go to a fella who we gave a bit of a shout out to just now and also last week, Brendan Hands. How's that? I'll go Brendan Hands.
I tipped Brendan for best on field last week, and he went pretty close. So I think that's a good pick. He's in some nice form. I think you talk about those hustle players, and he is really showcasing that kind of energy, what it takes to beat the Penrith Panthers. Like you, I'm morally obligated to now tip the win. And, it's not like we're gritting our teeth here. I think the boys are going to make a real fist of it. So you said 6 points. I'll be even bolder. 10-12, like the NRLW tip. First try scorer. Jake Tungor has actually gone the last 2 weeks as FTS, I'm pretty certain. So you're backing him to make the Hattie here, or potentially Isaac, obviously, to chime in there. I will go with Bryce Cartwright, first try scorer, and best on field. Whoa. I mean, I think he was pretty good in the game last year when he was thrown into a cauldron without Moses. I will go for one of the cheapies in Dylan Brown. I feel like he had a great game last week, and these are the sort of games when it's a real effort, fest, and you're looking to guys when the fatigue's kicking in to make something happen, and I think Dylan's that guy. So I will go with Dillbags for best on field.
Well, mate, I think it's a fair call. I have to say I was very tempted to go with either Dylan or Gutho for this. Now, again, a reminder that we will be in Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, in the bistro from 5:30 with special guest Michael Butner, as we talk about not only a bit about his career, but we'll be talking about the game today and also the match that will be kicking off. Come in, say good day to him. These Eels ambassadors, these legend players, they're always tremendous with their time. You can grab photos with them, have a bit of a chat, get something signed, And thank you as well to all the people who have been coming in and saying g'day to us and spending time with the legend players. It really adds to the atmosphere before the game. Certainly gets us pumped for the match that's following. Of course, if you are listening to this / watching this on YouTube, you don't get our ugly faces on there, but you do get the dulcet tones of us talking about football. But if you are listening to this on YouTube, if you're not subscribed, give it a subscription, give it a like, comment if you want. But all those sorts of things help with the old so-called algorithms that are out there with social media. It just helps the Cumberland Throw to grow, and we do want to keep being able to do what we do for you in the way of content. So if you could do that, shout out as well to our sponsor, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Greg and the team, thanks so much for all the support that you've given us, not only this year, but over all the years before that. John, another fine effort. Thank you again to our listeners. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.